Welcome to Logos Live. I'm Robert Martin, Director of the City Bible Forum in Melbourne, and I'm your host for the show. Logos is Greek for word or message, and Logos Live engages the Christian message before a live audience in the CBD of Melbourne. And do we have a live audience here today? And we also aim to have a bit of fun. Who said exploring the big questions of life shouldn't be enjoyable? Christmas is a joyous and fun occasion. In Australia, we even celebrate it in July. So what is it about Christmas that makes it so fun? What are the origins of Christmas? And is the story based on fact or fiction? Well, today we meet a fiction writer as we think about Christmas, fact or fiction, dispelling the myths. Mikey Bayliss is an author and English teacher who loves learning languages and playing ping pong. He has written 2 books. There's a Hipster on My Roof Drinking Coffee and Journey from the East. And he joins me now. Please welcome Mikey Bayliss.
Thank you.
Mikey, welcome to Logos Live.
Thank you, Rob.
Now, do you like Christmas?
I love Christmas.
Yeah? What is it about Christmas you love?
I love the smells. I love the smell of the tree, the food. I love presents. I even sleep under the tree often.
Really? Under the Christmas tree?
Under the Christmas tree. I love it that much.
Yeah? Do you have a favourite Christmas?
Well, for me, every day is Christmas, so probably 2 days ago. But probably the first Christmas when I received a big Lego set. That's in my head. I can remember just how exciting that was, probably as a 5-year-old.
Yeah. But every day is Christmas for you?
Every day is Christmas, so yeah, I love it.
So ho-ho.
Ho-ho.
Now, you also like Kung Fu.
I love Kung Fu.
Why your love of Kung Fu?
I don't know why I love it. I think I love the theatrical nature of it. So I just love watching Kung Fu movies. Nearly all Kung Fu movies have a kind of element of comedy to them and adventure. So Jackie Chan movies, Stephen Chow movies.
And you've combined these two into a book, Journey
right.
from the East, a Christmas book with Kung Fu elements. But what made you write a book about Kung Fu and Christmas?
Okay, well, I love Christmas and I love the Bible. But all these ideas about the wise men, I like trying to find out what the real story is. And I was intrigued by some stories that had the wise men being super righteous people from a land far away being teleported by Jesus and other ones where I wasn't sure if it kind of rang true. So I thought I explore kind of all the stories and traditions about where the wise men came from. Mm-hmm. And when I found out that many of them point back to China, or actually China is one of the wise men that came, I just started thinking, oh, this is a great idea for a story.
Yeah.
Where they kind of travel from all parts of the East, so not just one single place, but then they meet up and they have to fight their way across this very kind of dangerous and controlled landscape and rugged landscape and end up meeting Jesus. Yeah. If Jackie Chan's listening, I think Jackie Chan and Mel Gibson together would make a great Kung Fu epic out of this story.
And apparently you've even tried giving Jackie Chan a copy.
Oh yeah, twice.
Yeah. You don't know if he's read it?
Oh no, not yet. I don't know if I need to translate it or not.
But it'll be a good Kung Fu movie, you think?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Christmas blockbuster.
Now we do try to have a bit of fun on Logos Live. And today we're talking with Mikey Bayliss about Christmas. And Mikey, as you've written a book about Kung Fu and Christmas, in today's quiz, I'm going to test you on how much you know about Kung Fu Christmas.
Okay.
Do you feel qualified?
Probably 2 years ago when I wrote the book, but yeah.
Right. Okay. Question 1. There's 2 questions, multiple choice. If you Google Kung Fu Christmas, what is the first result that appears? Now, we've tested this on multiple accounts, and we can verify the result. Okay. So is it A, Journey from the East, a book by Michael Bayliss? Is it B, a Pinterest image of Kung Fu Panda leaping out of a Christmas cake? Is it C, Kung Fu, The Legend Continues, a TV series with the episode Shaolin Christmas? Or is it D, a YouTube clip of National Lampoon's Kung Fu Christmas?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so which one of that is the...
They're all...
If you Google it, which one would come up first?
Oh, they're all great. Even I'd say the Kung Fu Panda one.
Well, actually, I'm sorry, it's not. It's actually D, the National Lampoon's Kung Fu Christmas. It was... 1978, National Lampoon magazine released an album, Greatest Hits of National Lampoon, a collection of parody tunes, one of which was the track Kung Fu Christmas. And that's the top Google
amazing.
result.
I'm going to search that, yep.
Yeah, it's a parody.
Okay.
So it's a Kung Fu Christmas, but it's actually quite a violent movie if you watch it. There's lots of blood and shooting and those sort of things. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, now the topic for today is distinguishing fact and fiction around the Christmas story. Mm-hmm. So the second question is just fact or fiction. Mm-hmm. Fact or fiction. Journey from the East is the greatest Kung Fu Christmas story ever.
Fact.
Correct. Yes,
Thank
that's
you.
right.
Thank
Yes. In fact, it's the only only Christmas Kung Fu story ever.
Yeah.
We even Googled it, and apparently there are no other Christmas Kung Fu stories.
Well, that's what I base my answer on. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. However, when you do Google greatest Kung Fu Christmas story, your book doesn't make the first page. In fact, it doesn't make the first 20 page. In fact, I stopped after 20 pages because I wasn't sure when I'm ever going to see it.
I'm gonna have to
Anyway.
talk to my SEO manager.
Yes, that's exactly. I think so. Yeah. So, Mikey, in our Kung Fu Christmas quiz, you got 1 out of 2 correct. You passed. Big round of applause for
you,
Mikey. So, Mikey, tell us a bit more about your book, the greatest Kung Fu story ever told. The fact. What inspired it?
So there's a guy called Professor Sir Colin Humphreys. I think you put the professor first and then the sir. He's a physicist in Cambridge. And so he's doing some amazing research there. But in his spare time, he's a bit of an Indiana Jones. So he finds things in the Bible that he goes, hang on a second, I want to apply some science and some history to this. And so he actually travels the Middle East, tracking stuff down and trying to verify if these things in the Bible could have happened. So one of his articles on the Star of Bethlehem that appeared sparked my interest. And then it actually referred to some writings in China where people there were cataloging the sky, and when stars and supernova exploded and other things happened, what was their response to this? And one of it was that when a star like this appeared, it just meant that there was a new king that was coming, and it also meant both violence and peace coming as well. And so with my hyperactive imagination and my love of Kung Fu movies, I started looking and researching, could this have happened? Could people have come from here? And then I found out that many Chinese Christians believe that one of the wise men were from China, and that his name was Liu Shang. And he's one of the central characters of this book. And so I had to delve into some pretty crazy Chinese history books that were written 2,000 years ago. And they're translated into English because my Chinese isn't that good. But yeah, they're big books and they're history books, so they're sometimes hard to read. But just all of the connecting the dots and finding out about Persia, which was ruled by the Parthians at the time, and all of this history, just so fascinating. And so I wanted to put it together in a little pill of a book.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
And so this Journey from the East is, in some ways, the result of your discussion.
Yeah, so I haven't put a map in here. I haven't used modern names. I've used the ancient names. So I want, when people read it, I want them to Google or look on Google Earth for the place name, look at the person's name and Google it, see what it means, or were they real people in history? I just think, yeah, it's amazing the age we live in where we can track down these facts and see if they're fact or fiction or not.
All right.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we'll talk about how to discern the difference between the two in just a second. But apparently in your book, there's connections with monkey magic.
There is.
As well.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Okay, well, kind of the template is monkey magic. Monkey magic is based on a story called Journey to the West. It's not as old as some people think, but it's China's most beloved story. And so China makes a movie of it every year, or about 3. They make a TV series of it every year. They love it in Korea and Japan as well. Even Dragon Ball's based on it. And it was when I actually read the actual book Journey to the West, it's actually kind of a satire piece on hypocrisy in religion. So it's not some big Buddhist kind of... It actually talks about the good things about Buddhism, but it's more looking at people and how they interact with religion and their vices and virtues, and kind of with a lot of action and kung fu in it. So that was written, I think, about 500 years ago by a priest, and it looks fascinating. And so I use that as the template.
And so you're hoping that your book's going to be made into a movie every year as well?
Exactly, and 3 movies every year and a TV show. Yeah,
that's right.
Netflix rang me yesterday because I had to pay my subscription.
That's fact or fiction? That's
yeah.
Fiction. Yeah. Anyway, so how have people received the book? People who have read it?
Well, my wife said, it's good that she read it, and she said she was so worried that 2 months was going to be wasted in my life when I wrote it, and she said, I'm so glad it wasn't. So she liked it. But I found a lot of people complain that the fight scenes aren't long enough. A lot of people say, that couldn't have really happened. That's not really historical. Those Romans couldn't have fought those people that way. A lot of the things I put in here are actually from oddities from history that have said to have happened and were recorded. So, strange defeats and things. But I have an audience with kind of 11-year-old boys and women in their 30s. They're my fan group at the moment, and I'm happy with that. That's cool.
That's great. Now, so your book's
So
intended...
Jackie Chan's a 30-year-old woman, isn't he?
Possibly.
Yeah, he's going to love it.
Yes, that's true. So your book's intended to be in some ways historical fiction.
Yeah.
So why write fiction?
Maybe I think the reason to write fiction was to get people to think about it. Because, I mean, we all know that there were 3 wise men and their names were Balthazar and all this. But the Bible doesn't actually mention... What's that?
Baza,
yeah.
Baza,
yeah.
That's the Australian...
Gaspar, yeah.
Caspar, that's right, yeah.
The Bible doesn't actually mention these names, and I looked into the traditions where they came from, and across the Middle East, and even in China, even in Afghanistan, they had different traditions about what happened, and many of them were hagiorific, or I don't even know how to say the word. They sanctified it. They made it. These wise men were so pure and nice, and they came, and Jesus teleported them across the Middle East to visit them. And I went, no, come on, I want it to be more like the Bible, where it's messy and good people do bad things, and all this bad stuff happens. So I just thought, I'm going to throw my mix into it, saying rather than, there are people arguing, no, it's from Persia, no, he's from Arabia. I'm like, let's just say they came from everywhere and see what happens. And so just that, idea. Yeah.
Now, some would say that the Christmas story itself is a story or is fiction.
Yes.
What do you say to that?
I've been challenged many times by that question, and when I've looked at it and the historicity, I suppose it's an issue for Christianity in general. Basically, the copies of the Bibles that they found from the Gospels and the letters from the Bible, copies of them were found all over the Middle East, and different ones in different places, far flung. And so I just can't see how someone could have made these stories up. I'm not going to say that the story is so fantastic that it couldn't have, it had to be true. People make up really crazy stories.
Like Journey from the East.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It had to be true. And I just think there's so much evidence when I have investigated, say witnesses and recordings of the writings were found across the Middle East. They've come from so many different places that they couldn't have been made up in one spot. And so put that into the greater history of Israel and their journey as a people. And then to me, it makes sense. And to me, the history does hold up.
So what's the difference then with your story, which is historical fiction in some ways? How can you tell the difference between fact and fiction?
I think, the way it's written, you know me, who's the author. Maybe in 500 years' time, they will think that this is real, but I don't think so because of all the context. And so the way it's written, the purpose of why it was written, I'm very clear as to why I'm writing it. The purpose, the authorship, the context, I think all of those reasons can give you a pretty good hint that it's not real.
So you're obviously, the context you're writing is to entertain or to perhaps tickle some ideas.
Yeah.
But
I want
the
people to
purpose
go
of the gospel writers
get
is
stuck
actually...
into an atlas and a history book and, get into the end of the library where all the Chinese history books are written from 3,000 years ago and go, wow, there's some crazy stuff here, and start looking.
Well, as part of Logos Live, we reflect on the scriptures, the Logos, and we're going to explore the Christmas story as recorded in the Bible. But before we do that, we're interested to hear about why you believe the scriptures are worth following. So, Mikey, what convinced you to become a Christian believer?
Okay, so I grew up as a son of a preacher man. My dad was an Anglican minister. And so I grew up knowing the story. I tried reading the Bible every year from when I was about 5. I'm surprised I don't know it more because I really tried. I thought, I just said it for myself. So high school, I did a lot of things that I'm pretty sure a Christian shouldn't do based on the system of belief. So, I started drinking fairly early on. I had a pornographic addiction from quite early on. And so when I got to university, I was struggling with all these things, knowing that there was forgiveness there, trying to work out how it all fit in. And then I was invited to an orgy. And I said, okay, this is probably the turning point. If I go, I'm probably not a Christian. We can talk about that more, but I decided there and then I had to work out if it was true or not because I wanted to go. So I took about a half a year to talk to every expert I knew, every skeptic I knew, people, read books. And the conclusion I came to was that all the reasons people gave for not being a Christian, it was very hard to find one that was based on history. Most of it was based on philosophy or logic or or emotion. But for me, I just wanted to know if it was true or not historically, and what I found in that time was I couldn't escape it. Yeah.
And so then it obviously affected your behavior?
Yeah, so then I think probably more than ever, then Jesus became Lord of my life, and I didn't turn around, but I stopped. Well, I actually went and got help from a psychiatrist and a few other things, non-Christian one. But, there's all these great things that are around to help you. Yeah, for me, it wasn't an instantaneous change of behavior, but more like my attitude changed and definitely moved in a better direction and kind of, healthier, I would say.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that. The part of the Bible we're reflecting on today comes from the Gospel of Matthew, which is one of the 4 biographies of Jesus' life that we have. And the biography from Matthew contains one of the 2 accounts of the birth of Jesus in the New Testament. Yep. The other's found in the Gospel of Luke. Now, we're reflecting on the account from Matthew because this one mentions the Magi. Matthew 2, 1-12 says, "After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, 'Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him.'" So who exactly were these Magi? We've mentioned it before. Your book depicts them as kung fu masters. No. Is that fact or fiction?
Well, they're not all kung fu masters in there. So they basically end up coming from everywhere. The thing is that we don't know who they were. There are many traditions and myths that come from about 300 to 400 years after Jesus. And they're those stories I was talking about where it looks like people are trying to put themselves back into the story.
Right.
Trying to say, no, we're the wise men. No, we're the wise men. And standing up that way. So, Ben-Hur, the movie, was based on a book that was one of the top-selling books of all time in the States. And that starts with the wise men. And that's just 3 kind of kings, the traditional ones we know, walking towards Jesus. But what triggered me was saying, you're not going to have 3 rich dudes on camels trekking through the dangerous desert where there are bandits and everything. And the Persian Empire, so the Parthians at the time, controlled the whole middle area, and they took taxes at each toll, and there were people killing each other and, fights and everything. I was like, they would have needed someone to look after themselves. And so they would have needed assassins, like bodyguards and mercenaries. And so I just riffed on that idea and voila.
Now you mentioned Liu Shang. Sorry, my Chinese is not not perfect.
No, you just use the other version of him. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, Liu Shang is a character in your story. Can you tell us a bit about him?
Okay, so he was a court official, a real one. He recorded a lot of Chinese history at the time of the main emperor he was around was Emperor Ai in China about 5-4 BC. And he went missing for 2 years from the Chinese court. That's recorded at the time where it looks like was one of the viable times when Jesus was born. Because Jesus would have had to have been born before Herod died, 4 BC. And that's when he was around, disappeared for 2 years. Now, it does take more than a year round trip from China, but I get around that in the book. And he recorded the history. He did return to China, although the king he was serving was killing a lot of the people in his court, the wise people and the strong people. And he and his son started the biggest library in China at the time, and that has been moved from the old capital to Ningbo now. It's there now, the 3rd largest, oldest private library in the world. And my conspiracy theory went nuts when the section around the time of Jesus' birth is missing. So that could have been just because he was missing at the time and didn't fill in his paperwork, or there's a bigger conspiracy up and people don't want us to know that it was really him. So, yeah.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Now, most Christmas pageants say that there are 3 Magi who came. Your book proposes a whole entourage. Is that just a myth that there's 3?
Well, if you look at the stories in the near Middle East and the Middle East, some of the myths have 12 people, some of them have groups unnumbered. I think the 3 comes from the 3 gifts that are mentioned, and something that probably happened around 300 or 400 AD. Yeah.
Well, that passage before us we just read has no mention of 3 there. It just says that the Magi from the east came to Jerusalem.
Yep. And Magi was just kind of generic term for wise man or magician. That's where we get the magic wand from. They had sticks and they were called Magi. And
now in verse 2 there, the Magi claims to have seen a star. We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. Is the star another myth of the Christmas story?
Well, that's what triggered Professor Sir Colin Humphreys. He said, he can't handle things in the Bible just being, made up. And so he goes, could it happen? So he catalogued the stars that were appearing at those times. And he thinks that, well, there's definitely the Broom star that he says is the most viable candidate, appeared in the sky for 70 days and went from the east all the way across to the west. And so he says that's the one.
So a
that
broom
happened.
star?
It's got a broom star. So so it sounds cooler in Chinese. I can't pronounce it, but
Okay.
the broom star, and it's also because it looks like a sword or a broom because it's actually a comet
Yeah.
that goes across, and it's said to sweep out the old and in the new. And that's why he said the Chinese kings were scared of that at the time. The Parthians probably would have been, but they didn't ride a lot because they liked riding their horses and shooting things.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the comet is this star. You suggesting the one appeared about 5 BC or so. That's
Yeah, so 4 BC. And he said 2 other things happened 2 years before and 2 years before that. And he said that sounds like it's something that would have led up to it. Or definitely in the Chinese writings, they talk a lot about it. And in the Han dynasty that was around at the time in China, they celebrated the birth of a king with a star image. And that was always look to the heavens to see when that is.
So what do you think it means when it says that these magi wanted to worship this new king?
They think that this king's going to be different. So all the kings at the time were killing off people that they were worried about. They were paranoid. They weren't really looking after their people. And so one thing, it seems that this is going to be a king of peace, a king who will bring peace. And that's my
So that
reading
might have
of
been
it.
the reason that they were interested in following this king.
Yeah, making some sort of agreement, or looking to bring peace around the area.
Now, King Herod was clearly an historical figure.
Yes.
Who was King Herod?
So King Herod was one of the Jewish kings of the region who had a bit of a deal going with Rome, and he killed a lot of people.
Yeah.
And he was very scared that someone would kill him and take his place, so he killed them first.
Yeah. It talks about the fact that this new king coming, do you think that Herod would have welcomed this new king being born in his kingdom?
Well, it's interesting. From the Bible, it looks like he's pretty scared of him. Although he does seem that he's a viable king that's been born, because he asks about the Messiah or the one chosen to lead God's people. So, he seems that he's pretty worried about him.
Now, the Gospel of Matthew records the interaction with Herod and the Magi, yet the other account, which we referred to before, of the birth of Jesus in the Gospel of Luke, doesn't
That's right.
record the Magi. It records the appearance of shepherds instead, which Matthew doesn't record.
Yeah.
Now, leading critics of Christianity like Richard Dawkins see these contradictions and propose that the two accounts of the birth of Jesus have glaring contradictions. What do you think? Is this a problem?
Well, if you read both of them and you put them side by side, you can see that they don't have glaring contradictions. So Luke's including the shepherds for a reason, and Matthew's including the kings for a reason. But also, it looks like in Luke that's the night of his birth, but in Matthew that's sometime later, months or even maybe a year or two. And that's backed up by how long it takes for Herod to kill all his time frame given for children that are born. Yeah.
Well, we'll come to that now. With Matthew 2:16 describes what is known as the slaughter of the innocents. And it says in verse 16, when Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious and gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. So in some respects, what you've just said, the 2 years there would provide one reason for the proposed contradiction between the two.
Yeah.
But now this is also the scene for the dramatic final scene of your book, which we won't spoil, but there's plenty of kung fu there. Now this story, the slaughter of the innocents, is disputed by some because there's no historical external record of this event. So how do we know that the event recorded for us in Matthew here isn't just fiction?
So you have to take everything together. Who would have been recording it at that point in time that Herod was killing those kids around that area? It wasn't the biggest area.
Now, Mikey, you've written a book on the Christmas story. There's good reasons to believe that the Christmas story happened, but so what?
So what?
So what difference does the Christmas story make to you?
Okay, well, I love eating and I love presents, but I don't think that's your question. So when I see Jesus in the Christmas story, I think, well, you can't have Christmas without Easter. And many of the great hymns and Christmas carols remind us of that. The whole thing is that he's being born for a purpose. There's a lot of melancholy hanging around the Christmas story. It's a messy story.
Yep.
So I love Christmas. I do get a bit annoyed at Christmas when everything is too cheery and golden bubbles and children singing and all nice. Because there's also a lot there where it's, there is the pain of human life mixed in with it. So when I see Jesus being born, and I believe that Jesus is God come to earth, I think, wow, having that king or even God come to earth into the mess, it shatters my ego, but it also makes me feel loved as well. So when I see that story of Jesus coming into this violent time, coming into this messy time with this purpose to save humanity, I'm just overjoyed. But with that tinge of, life is hard. Yeah.
I mean, you could even refer to that, the slaughter of the innocents, as reflective of that time. What an awful story.
Yeah.
That there's children have been hacked to death by a jealous king. Yet that's
there's
the
so
world in
much
which
bad
Jesus
stuff
comes.
in that story. Yeah, and just
Does the Christmas story take on more or less meaning for you if the events were fact or fiction?
It's more meaning if it's fact. If it is just a big lie, I think maybe that could help a little bit, make people kind of aspire to something better. But it doesn't answer the problems of life, and I believe that the Bible story of Christmas does that. It actually, if it's true, it's offering something very special in life.
So, Mikey, the Christmas story, fact or fiction? Final thoughts.
Okay, fact. It's you have to take it as all of Christianity. I know there are a lot of layers that have grown up over the Christmas story since it happened. So looking at it afresh and looking at it in the historical context and, in the whole context of the Bible, it's a very powerful story. And because I believe it is true, it has a real message for people of forgiveness and Jesus offering this salvation for people.
Let me leave you with the Logos for the day from Matthew 1:1-2. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born, King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." I look forward to you joining us next time for Logos Live. Please thank our guest today, Mikey Bayliss. Logos Live is recorded before a live audience in the CBD of Melbourne over lunchtime every second Wednesday. You can be part of the audience. Just check out citybibleforum.org/Melbourne for the recording schedule. You're welcome to turn up or continue to tune in whenever Logos Live is broadcast or podcast. I look forward to you joining us next time for Logos Live.